Hello and welcome. This is NTA Tuesday Live, and I'm Cyril Stover. For not less than 4 decades now, Nigeria's drive to industrial revolution has suffered sharp decline, giving rise to high export trade profile in an import-based economy. But this narrative is not to be perpetual, as the federal government is introducing friendly measures to support local industries and promote homegrown solutions to national issues, more of which are economically inclined. Tonight, Tuesday Live will focus on national development, protecting local industries. But before we go into the conversation, let's get to see this report put together by Amaka Owo.
Lagos is home to several industries into mass production and value addition that cater to diverse needs of the populace across the entire nation. The Lekki Free Trade Zone, for instance, is an investment destination for foreign and local investors, with figures from the state government indicating over 50 billion naira investment in the last 1 year. Industry players believe that more collaborations from the government will enable local industries to thrive.
In the last 6 months, we have seen significant agreements, MOUs signed with power producers. Some are renewables, some are gas-fired. So we are expected to see a lot more independent power plants in Lagos in the near future, in addition to those that are already operating. This administration of Lagos State and the prior administrations have established some independent power plants around Lagos.
Sustainability of local industries, they say, will include bridging technological gaps, engagement of highly skilled professionals, providing incentives, among other homegrown solutions by the present administration to foster economic viability of local industries.
The margin in this country is the highest anywhere in the world. You can put in 10 million naira in a new business, and in less than 1 year, you have 100 million. Businessmen can exercise it in Nigeria, and that's why Asians are flooding this place. Nigerians abroad have enough capital to stabilize this country industrially and otherwise.
I think the major push actually have to come from the government side, who have to understand that the monetary policies, the fiscal policies, the research policies, the importation policies, all these things, and then there has to be a development plan that must be stuck to.
Ease of doing business, issues surrounding taxation have been addressed by the present administration with the recent injection of 2 trillion naira to absorb economic shocks. This will become absolute solutions towards an increased GDP for job creation and stronger economy. In Lagos, Amaka Owo.
All right, that report sets the tone for tonight's discussion. Let me introduce our guests to you. I would like to welcome to this program Engineer Mansour Ahmed, who is immediate past president, Manufacturers Association of Nigeria, and interim president, Pan-African Manufacturers Association. Thanks for being here with us tonight.
Thank you, sir.
All right.
Thank you for having me.
All right. Okay, we are also joined by Professor Ken Ife, development economist. Prof, good to see you again.
Thank you for having me.
Right. Let me also welcome to this program Alhaji Abubakar Maigandi Shatima. He is the president of IPMAN president. Thanks for being here.
Thank you very much.
Well, okay. And joining us via Zoom from Houston is Hector Igbiki Owubo. He's editor-in-chief, Sweet Crude Reports. Thanks for being with us tonight. All right. Thank you. We'll get to you as we progress in the program. Well, as you know, the nature of Tuesday Live, at some point in time, it gets interactive. It means you can join in the conversation. But when we get there, we'll remind you of the process and the procedure. For now, let's begin to look at the issues at stake as we start this conversation. And let me start with Engineer Mansour Ahmed. And what are the critical issues at stake involved in national development, especially when we talk about direct relationship to local industrialization. What are these issues that are hanging on?
I think the most critical issues for industrialization to take root is the policy environment, which is the responsibility of government, to create and set a policy environment that, first of all, promotes industrialization and ensures that those who invest in industries, manufacturing, infrastructure, industry-related investments are not only promoted but also supported and protected to grow. Because every industry, particularly in the manufacturing sector, in the real sector, every industry is like a baby. When it is born, when it is set up, if it is not nurtured and supported, it will not take long. So the most critical thing is government attitude to industrialization, government support and government willingness to protect particularly young industries. Unfortunately, over the past several years, 40 years or more, we have been led to believe that when you set up a new industrial venture, you're supposed to set it up in an open market, open to global competition. And that does not work because, like I said, as you start the industry, it has to grow. It has to build capacity. It has to create skills in its people. It has to recognize, understand the market in which it is working, and then it has to continue to grow and grow. If it doesn't grow, of course, the economy cannot benefit. We're being told that you must go out there and compete with mature industries that have had, perhaps in some cases, 50, 100 years of experience. So you cannot compete like that. Secondly, you are expected to compete from the time you start your operations. And we know that if in the scale is very critical. If you don't build the scale, you cannot compete. Let me give you a quick example. You have an industry that produces, let's say, cement or ballpoint pens. And you have capacity, you start with a capacity of 100,000 units. And you open up your market to another industry abroad that has been operating for 50 years before you are set up. And that has a capacity for 1 million units, to the point where economists will tell us that after the first 900 units, it has covered its cost and recovered and made its profit, and the additional 100,000 units, probably they can give free away free. And then they now bring this to your country and they expect you to expect that to compete with the young industry just starting. So to create, to first of all, to grow and take root, to mature, to build capacity, to build skill, and to be able to scale up to a point where you can compete. Those are critical. And the only way that can happen is government should consciously not only promote the industries to be set up, that is to promote investment, but also consciously protect and nurture those industries. Do whatever is necessary to support them to grow, because that's the only way you can grow and compete.
All right, thank you so much. But this concept is well known, Prof, and it's assumed that over years, the various governments would have recognized what Engineer Mansour Ahmed just talked about, but that hasn't been the case. And if you view the scenario, we're seeing here stunted growth, or industries that are set up and they don't survive. If you look at the Nigerian industrial scope landscape now, it's hard to pinpoint anyone that has been around for 30, 40 years.
You know, it's good to compare like to like. You know, in your last program, I was very clear that what we were dealing with was stagflation, not inflation that we knew, but a complicated form of it, which is called stagflation. And then I began to unpack the characteristics of it. So to enter into this discussion, I have to put a historical context to this.
because by around 1945, remember there was a conscious international division of labor that consigned us, Nigeria and Africa, to producers of raw materials. And these raw materials can be crude, natural gas, solid mineral, agricultural. Produce it for the West to process, and you have to take what they process. So we were designed to consume what was produced and by them. The effect of that is this. What it now meant is that we were now placed as an import-dependent economy by design. And all the political economy, even the massive side of the Bretton institutions, they were all meant to perpetuate that status quo. So however you try to escape during diversification policy, using all that, they intend, example, European Economic Partnership Agreement wants 80% of our market. So you can tell me, if you have to buy 80% of your market import, then what business are you going to do with African countries, with Russia, with America, with China? It's just to give you an idea, a sense. So when you see people who are struggling to produce, you look at the odds that are stacked against them. You have technology, they invest their money, they buy technology, they bring that, and then you think innovation, you think you cannot protect those? That is the sense of infant industry protection. Every country in the world protects its industry for a finite time until they are strong enough, able to recoup some of the investment, and then they can play out. It's every country. So you go into the WTO straight, they say, look, everybody wants to. But when you use the wrong language and say, restrictive trade practice, we don't want anything imported in this country, then they'll fight you. But when you say infant protection, all of them do that. So it's the language that makes them go to tribunal. Second point is, as he's quietly mentioned, policy framework and policy enabling environment and business ease of doing business are all the domain of government to ensure that the public sector creates the space, maintains a level playing field that would enable investors to come into the space and then invest their money and then have the confidence in the economy to be able to do more. Now you have trade facilitation, which means, according to WTO and World Bank, they said 10 to 15% of total trade volume is lost to trade facilitation. What it means, Nigeria imports and exports together about $120 billion. So 18 to $20 billion of this money is lost because of lack of trade facilitation. But who bears this cost? It's the private sector. Nobody worries about it. It's the private sector that bears that cost. And then you now see some of these coming in inflation, which is tax. It's another form of tax. Then you also come to the area of infrastructure. We believe that Nigeria is our stock of infrastructure is about 30% to 35%, compared to South Africa, 80%, which means that we have had a historical years of abject neglect of infrastructure. Infrastructure is not just road, though, because people think that it is the highway, trunk highway, arterial highway, and no, it's not just that. It has even the rail. The rail is infrastructure. You have the waterways infrastructure. You have technology infrastructure. You have broadband infrastructure. You have specialized infrastructure like inland container depot. You have industrial parks. It's industrial infrastructure. If you do how many people have you given license for free trade zone? About 35. How many of them are working? It's because they're sitting down waiting for people to come and invest and take them. No. When you create this and invest in those, people will come to invest in your country. Many people will not borrow money abroad, billions of dollars, to come here to manufacture something, and they spend up using half of that money to build the infrastructure. They will not lend you, they will give you the money. So all of these will come together to make sure that we are encouraging our businesses. And if you look at what the casualties we have had, textile industry, we've lost over 2 million jobs in textile industry. They're all graveyards in Kano, in Kaduna, in Lagos, industrial graveyards. You come to a traditional industry like oil and gas, and Nigerians look at the industry structure where you are perpetually being hemmed in to continue to import what you produce in refined product. It's crazy. Some of these analyses we are going to go into, but it baffles me that we don't see. Obasanjo dealt with one issue. He says, stop this importation of cement, but do it in a constructive way. Rather than import 80% of your cement, I will give you license to import clinkers if you can show me your cement factory. And then see how that played out. There were some pains, but we ended up having some gain. From 80% import to now a net exporter of cement. So what's wrong with a successful model being tried in a modular refineries, being tried in oil? Why don't we want to try something that has succeeded in the country?
Right, thank you so much. The question of production of raw materials. We have just been the producer of raw materials, so finished goods that you later import. And as a clear example in the oil and gas industry. Let's come to Alhaji Abubakar Megendi Shetima, IPMAN president.
Well done. Well, I heard what the professor have said. Really, if you want to promote industry, there are so many factors which the government has to consider. One, in terms of electricity, finance, and enabling environment by the government. I think I will just cite an example. The time when I went to Dubai, I met one Chinese woman. By the time when I meet her, I know in terms of capital, I pass her. But we developed a relationship up to the situation whereby I visited her in China. When I go there, she has just a very small factory with small capital. So what she was telling me that in China, if you can be able to export, most of the banks in China, they will give you a single-digit interest. Because if you want to establish any business without capital, that business will not function the way you want it to function, especially in terms of industrialization. And presently, the woman now, she is manufacturing here in Nigeria, in Lekki, a very big company on kitchen utensils. That's what she is manufacturing today in Nigeria. So sincerely speaking, we need support of the government in terms of finance, not to say any industrial man should go to the bank and collect the loan. Because the interest charges of Nigeria today, in most of our banks, if you carry the money, definitely it's very difficult for you to have a profit or even to manage that industry because of the interest. At the end of the day, when you carry the loan, you may end up in closing the shop. Just of recent, you heard what Dangote have said about the interest rate. That one is there. And again, and secondly, again, this electricity, that is power, it matters a lot in terms of industrialization. Provided that we doesn't have enough power, actually, it makes it very difficult for any industry to survive. And again, there is another thing which in terms of our, in terms of the Nigerians, we don't normally patronize what we produce. I think there are some rubber companies that I have seen in Mina. There is one Emirat, and then there is another one. I'm telling you, the people within that area, they will leave that production and go far away, maybe to Lagos or in another place to buy that particular district or foreign. So all these things, Nigerians will have to be patriotic. Because the way you have been seeing the other countries, whenever we go there, we normally see what they have been doing and say, if Nigeria cannot be able to do this. Actually, they recognize their country. And they used what their country produced in most of the cases.
Well, thank you so much. Opening comments. Issues are multidimensional, from policy to even the question of the people themselves, the citizens themselves, who would rather take to foreign products. But let's get the views of Hector Igbikio-Wubo, who is the editor-in-chief, Sweet Crude Reports, is joining us via Zoom from Houston. Right.
Yeah, thank you, Cyril. Once again, thank you very much for having me. I think I'd like to dwell on policy here. I think things are the way they are because there is a clear lack of a coherent energy security strategy. So you find government functionaries working at cross purposes. I've covered this industry from being a reporter to being a consultant to presenting papers and all whatnot. For almost 30 years now, and I cannot recall at any point in time Nigeria having a coherent energy security strategy. So when you function in a space where there isn't a coherent energy security strategy, everything is negatively impacted, from power supply to fueling, that's energy for your industries, your vehicular traffic, for industrial growth and all of that. Everything is negatively impacted. So I think we've reached a point where we should, first of all, be discussing a coherent energy security strategy. As soon as we're able to put that in place, we will stop working at cross purposes. There will be clarity of thoughts on the way forward. I think that's my take on this. I want to limit it to that because this affects the NNPC's functionality. It affects accountability. It affects everything across board. We need to have a coherent energy security strategy. That's my take.
Yeah, but when you say that's you're saying that all these years we haven't had any, and you've not seen anything that's leaning towards that.
What I'm saying to you, Cyril, is that we have pockets of ideas all over the place. When we have, if you cast your mind back to all successive administrations, you find that everybody who comes up with his own idea of what should be done. Now, before the immediate past administration left, they were talking about CNG, and they hope that that will solve fuel supply and distribution problems. But you see, that in itself hasn't helped. They were talking about introducing CNG vehicles. They were talking about, they were hoping that the Dangote refinery will also help address our fuel supply and distribution needs. The question to ask is, what exactly is the strategy? When you talk about introducing CNG vehicles, have you incentivized importation of those vehicles? Have you incentivized petrol station owners setting up or going in that direction? What are the incentives in place? Have you incentivized industries to even shift from use of other sources of energy to CNG and all whatnot? You know, so when you speak with the people at the Energy Commission of Nigeria, they tell you, well, they have an energy policy. You say, fine, what is this energy policy? Nobody can tell you about it. You know, so we need to stop talking in pockets. We need to stop having these conversations in pockets. We need to come up with a coherent energy security strategy. If we have clarity of thoughts on that, I think we'll make appreciable progress.
All right, thank you very much. We also have a number of reports we'll be rolling. They speak to the subject as well. And let's get to see this one from Abuja by Lydia Sampson.
The oil and gas sector is often referred to as the cash cow of the country's economy. Until the passage of the Petroleum Industry Act in 2021, the sector was regulated. Political appointments and patronage often dictate key decisions. The PIA unbundled the sector, influencing more private sector participants across the value chains. Nigeria's oil and gas remains complex and influential, with a delicate balance of power amongst various stakeholders.
We must increase our oil production too to 2 million barrels per day within the next few months. Remove all barriers for entry investment into the sector to enhance competitiveness.
Allegations of corruption and cronyism are allegedly pervasive, with politicians and their allies often benefiting from lucrative contracts and deals in the sector. Some key players are of the view that politics in the industry still persist and that despite the PIA provisions, host communities are not proactively involved, leading to tension and conflicts between oil companies and the communities, as well as disruptions in operations.
Somehow, somewhere, they are not recognized enough, and I believe if we do, it is going to ramp up our energy production. Allow the communities to contribute, and if the communities are able to contribute their own quota into the energy sector, I can guarantee you that at the end of the day, the insecurity will fizzle out on its own.
Now, Dangote Refinery, the largest single-train refinery in the world, with a capacity to process 650,000 barrels per day, made headlines over alleged attempts at frustrating the refinery operations by regulators in the downstream. This allegation has since been refuted.
And so I would like to assure Nigerians that this is a mandate that the authority takes very seriously, and that we are here to guarantee the well-being and health of Nigerians. And there is no dirty fuel that we will encourage to come into Nigeria.
For operators in the downstream and midstream, Dangote Refinery is a welcome development and game changer.
It's no longer news the Dangote Refinery is on stream, and that is also impacted positively into the oil and gas downstream sector. I want to believe going forward, all our clamor for review of rates by virtue of the cost of this will now be a thing of the past, because this last today is about 1,000 naira per litre ex Dangote depot. It is direct, we have direct relationship in terms of our operational cost.
Politics in Nigeria's oil and gas sector is an intricate web of interests, power, struggle, and lack of transparency. Experts say corruption, which key industry players accept is affecting the country's economy's development and global relationship. They agree that it is only by talking less and working together that the desired change can manifest while increasing production, so the sector can maximally harness its benefit.
We went down in our production, both oil and gas, nowhere near our capacity or our capability. We can blame anything, oil theft, integrity, and so on and so forth. We have decided that we'll stop the debates, and we have declared a war.
Oil and gas operations are international in nature, and as a result, international influence, global politics, and diplomacy also play a key role with countries like the US, China, and European nations vying for influence in Nigeria's energy sector. In Abuja, Lydia Sampson.
Now, speaking of the oil and gas sector, we do have the excerpts from a recent discussion in which the Nigerian industrialist, Africa's richest man, Aliko Dangote, raised concerns over certain issues. Let's listen to what he had to say quite recently.
In fact, the only thing that can make people to go into industrialization is the protection of the industries. Mr. Vice President, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, you can see today in our own sector of cement, all our tax holidays were withdrawn about 4 years ago. But because government is serious, there's protection in the business. As we speak today, we are building brand new 6 million metric tons at about 900. Despite the lack of dollars, we are spending $900 million to build 6 million plant in Itori. In fact, it has gone far, and we hope by end of next year we'll be able to finish. So it's not about incentives. No, it's about protection. There's no country that does not protect their own industry. But in Nigeria now, somebody will come and now say, okay, fine, yes, I have something to sell. My car is assembled in Nigeria. Yes, it's 40 million. Somebody said, no, give me the one assembled in Romania. I'd rather pay 45. Why? It doesn't make sense. So it is better we learn how to have what you call a circular economy, where all activities are within. Bankers will get their own, manufacturers will get their own, people who are even selling food, everybody will now get, but the things will remain internally and create massive economic activities. So, Your Excellency, I trust this summit will identify all the critical issues, deliberate on the challenges, and prosper how to reverse the trend. For me, the most critical issues to address is government policy and government attitude to investments and investors in the sector. I intend to focus on this in the next of my keynote address, which is protecting and supporting industries.
All right. It would seem that he just took the words right out of your mouth here. You talked about protection. The same thing Alhaji Abubakar Megandi Shetiba also spoke about the attitude of the Nigerians. And there you heard Aliko Dangote saying the same things. Protection, and he says it's not about just incentives alone, but protection, and every country protects its own.
Yeah.
And of course, the people themselves must recognize why it is essential to keep it within.
Well, thank you very much. I think, let me talk on this protection. Recently, a Japanese company, I think it's Japan Steel, Nippon Steel, wanted to buy American steel in America. And the Congress, the presidency in America, all came out and said no. They will not allow American steel to be sold to a Japanese company. And even though the Japanese company was offering a 40% premium on the value of the American steel. The reason is simple. The American government, the American Congress, the American people recognize that American steel is a key industry in America. It is a very, very critical industry, not only for those who own it, but for the country as a whole. It's like a national asset. And it also is a fundamental, if you like, anchor for other industries. So if you sold American industry, you're also selling the rest of your industry. And of course, you know, steel is perhaps the mother of all industrialization processes. There's no industry that goes without steel. if not in the product, in the machinery that produces the product. So this protection, and I think it's important, and I'm sure that Alhaji Aliko also had explained it in his speech. It's not just to say, look, my enterprise is having a problem, get a loan, protect it. No, it's to look at the industry. Look, this industry is basic to our development. It is fundamental to the creation of employment for our people. It is imperative that we sustain it, we scale it up, and therefore we would take every effort, we will make every effort to make sure that it doesn't fail. That is basically what protection is. And like Aliko said, every country protects its own industry. The same, the Chinese wanted to sell electric vehicles to America. The American government raised tariff by 100% on electric vehicles being imported from China, being imported from China in America. That's protection. And protection also seems like what happened during COVID. I don't know if, I'm sure most people do remember, that during COVID, literally all countries protected their pharmaceutical industry. I haven't been in the manufacturer association, I was aware that at one point, India put a stop to all export of pharmaceutical products into Nigeria. In fact, some of the pharmaceutical companies told me that they had actually goods coming from India that were already on the sea, and they were asked to go back because India's pharmaceutical industry must first of all provide pharmaceutical products to Indians first before anybody. So this issue is so critical, and this is why when I started, I said it is not just the policy but also the attitude. How does government view industry? And in every country, there are what we call strategic industries that have to be protected because not only are they important in themselves, but they are also important in ensuring the survival of other industries. I think Professor talked about the textile industry.
Yes.
I worked in the textile industry from about 1968. No, from 1978 or earlier. I worked in the textile for over 10 years. I worked in Kaduna, I worked in Kano, and so on. And in those years, in the early 80s, late 70s to early 80s, in Kaduna alone, we had over 30,000 employees, direct employees, working for the industries. And for every employee inside the factory, there are probably 7 to 10 other people who are daily earning their living from the activity of that industry. That means if you have 30,000 workers in the industry, you have probably 210,000 others who are either supplying to the industry, or who are buying from the industry, or who are distributing the products of the industry, or who are doing all sorts of, providing all sorts of services, including providing food to the workers. I ran an industry in Kaduna, the Kaduna textile industry. At that time, it was 2,700 workers, and we had at least 200 people supplying food. So it is very critical to understand that every nation must have a clear understanding of its responsibility, that is every government, of its responsibility to protect its industries. Now, I think Ms. Hector talked about education, energy policy. So it's not, and when we talk about policy as a whole, the key thing he said, and I think that's very important, is the need for coherence. It is not enough to have a policy today and then change it tomorrow, because that's not coherent. It's not enough also to have one policy today that says we should go this way, and another policy that says, one policy that says we should go to the right, and another policy that says we should go to the left. So coherence is important. But beyond coherent, we also must have aligned policies. Now, he said we don't have energy policy, and I agree with him. Until the Petroleum Act, we didn't have a coherent energy policy. The Petroleum Act at least took the sector, the petroleum sector, and created the omnibus law, which, in my view, is probably one of the best things that has happened in Nigeria for many, many years in the area of policy and regulations, because it was indeed quite comprehensive and coherent within the sector. But we need coherence, we need alignment, not only in a particular policy, but between policies. For instance, I'm sure he may have mentioned that we don't have a coherent industrial policy. But it's not only industrial policy. We don't have a coherent trade policy. And you cannot have a trade policy pushing you in that direction and then industrial policy pushing you in the other direction. And I think, great thing about this issue of policy is that this is not new. All countries that have developed, whether you're looking at China or Malaysia or India or Korea or Pakistan, you'll find that they have adopted an approach which enables them to bring their policies all in line, to align their policies so that one policy aids and supports another. Industrial policy must be supported by trade policy. We cannot have trade policy which says you can import everything you want to import because you are free to import, and then goes and says to people who want to produce in the country a product that is being imported and puts such huge taxes on them.
Prof, which is what's going on. You find out that even where citizens would rather patronize those products that are produced locally, there's a challenge of costs. And if you have to make a choice, many people would rather go for cheaper goods, which, I mean, are produced and sent in at a cheaper rate, and that's all.
I'll come to that, yes. Because when you address that, you can see what they call predatory pricing. Those competing with you from abroad can do predatory pricing, and then you can also see where that government abroad is deliberately subsidizing those products to undermine your productive capacity in this country.
So what are you doing?
So they kill you off first,
to protect
and
you,
then they now return to their price.
Right.
And then you also have alongside that dumping of substandard goods, as you have seen as being mentioned in the petroleum industry now. So there are all of those are tactics. But I get to two things. One is what our colleague from Houston was saying. PIA has covered a broad area of petroleum industry. Yes. But there's a renewable energy sector. The coherence of the renewable energy is coming from world, the movement on climate things and Nigeria adopting gas as our transition program and all of that, fueling our so there is a strategic direction coming from a global compact. So that's that. But the issue that you brought us to this point is about the strategic industry. Every country has their own strategic industries. And in our own case, our strategic industry, we have a right to add value to what God has given to us as a country. So our first line of strategic industries, add value to what God has given you. God has given you crude and natural gas. You have a right to add value to those. He has given you solid minerals of various descriptions, 44 of them in mineable quantity. You have a right to add value to those. And whoever wants to come and mine them and doesn't want to add value to it is secondary consideration. Then you have natural resources. You produce goods. Nigeria produces the most food in Africa. There are 20 products that give us about 200 million metric tons. Yam is 64 million metric tons. 42 million metric tons. Cassava is 64 million metric tons. And in 7 of these products, we are number 1 in the world. We produce 71% of world yam, 25% of world cassava. You cannot tell me that I'm not going to add value to my cassava. Because the role of strategic industry, that is where you are reserving your right to add value. is to enable you build a skills agenda and training of people and employment of people based on your natural and mineral resources. So if anybody tries to truncate it and dislocate you, he wants to actually kill the country, make you a dumping yard for unemployment, all social indices that are negative, he kills you. So whatever tactics they use to block you from investing in those, in adding value to those, is anti-government. It has to be contested. Now, in the framework of WTO, every country does protection of their strategic industries, everyone, and nobody argues it. What they argue is this. They will say, okay, we want to liberalize trade all over the world. In other words, let's open the competition so that people can bring in things that are actually, if you do it well, it brings down cost because it promotes, on the average, more aggregate demand. But the catch is this. Those of us in the developing country, we don't know how to play this game. We just come and tell them we want to ban every import. They won't like it. Everybody will run to the tribunal. You tell them, oh, you are dumping substandard goods to us, so we want to ban, and then you want to do, instead of saying you want to promote export, you say you want to backward. It's the language that we use that they protest against. Not that when you say, look, I produce crude, I want to refine it, I am refining it, and I'm having people knocking my head from there. Everybody will say, look, yeah, I want to protect the industry because it's creating major jobs in the country, it's creating, they will support you because the argument is flowing from the right point that you want to protect. It's a different thing that if you tell them you want to assemble a car and then you are going to import the part from here, and then you want it to be, they will argue with you. But your raw material, what your God has given to you, nobody should contest your right to develop and protect the investment you put there, to protect your right to access those that belongs to you. I mean,
let's still stay a little bit about the energy factor here. And, as you said, your God-given resources, no one says you shouldn't add value to them and then maximally use them for the benefit of your country. But in the case of crude oil and petroleum products generally, it's the reverse. Where even as we speak, fuel scarcity is a recurring
decimal.
And no matter what anyone has said about it, remove subsidy, everything will come back to normal. It still, is as if it is the NNPCL that is the sole importer of petroleum products. Meanwhile, you are crude, producing country. And these things cannot be explained for many people to understand.
Well, my attitude to this is, remember I began by analyzing the import dependency syndrome, right, which is predicated on the International Division of Labor that says you must produce raw materials. Now, and when you say import dependency, when you are import dependent economy, you know what happens? Every conceivable global headwind, you'll be vulnerable to that. It doesn't matter whether it is price of crude falling down, your economy will suffer. If it is medical, COVID-19, you will suffer. If it is the American prime mortgage crisis of 2008, you will suffer. It is Russian, Ukraine, grain. And Russia we have oil, they have oil, we have crude, they have crude. But why are we suffering? It's because Europe, 40% of their gas depends on Siberia. And when they started turning down the tap, all products made there went up through the roof. Because we're importing inflation.
Yes, but shouldn't that be an advantage for you? Because you do have these resources.
It should be, but we are still essentially an import-dependent economy. So the Forex issues hit you. The people who are importing transfer that straight to the buyer in the street.
Perhaps the IBAN president can help us out here.
Okay. Well, in fact, in terms of petroleum, I will say there is an improvement, to be sincere and candid. Since Mr. President, former President Buhari introduced the CNG program, and removal of subsidy. Despite the fact that he didn't remove the subsidy, they passed PIB bill. And when Mr. President Tinubu come into power, he removed the subsidy and they started using PIB bill. Actually, it has yielded some results. Presently now, just like the way they talk about the CNG, the program of CNG is going, and Mr. President even introduced a minister specifically on gas. You know, this gas, we have it in Nigeria in abundance, which we have not been utilizing it. But presently now, just of recent, the minister or the GMD inaugurated up to 12 gas filling stations in one day. Some here in Abuja, the remaining in Lagos. And there are so many more stations for gas which they have introduced, and which make us, we two independent petroleum marketers, we key into the program. We are even now presently, most of our marketers are constructing their daughter filling stations for gas. And there are those who even constructed their mother filling station for gas. That is the reason why when we have a small challenge, just of recent, on the issue of flooding and logistic problem, which resulted to this issue of scarcity. Most of the vehicles that have already converted their trucks or their small cars, provided that you have done the conversion, most of the filling station for gas here now, there is no any queue, there is no line. You will just go and take it within some minutes into your car and start using it. So this one is an added value, because now the government is generating a revenue in gas, unlike before. And that is the reason why even this crisis of those small crises that we are having, because of the help of that gas, actually it has really helped. Because all those who has already converted their vehicle, that is what they will be using. Likewise, in terms of transportation costs, like all these big trucks, most of them now, they are consuming gas. So it's cheaper. So actually, if the system continue and there is no interruption, definitely, when we key into that program, it will seriously help the country, whereby the pressure that we have been putting on PMS, it will drastically reduce at the end of the day. And I know the other time Dangote come out, he complained about Nigerians are not patronizing him, they bring the fake product. Actually, there is no fake product in this country. But the only thing which I know, if you establish a market, you have to go and get the buyers. If you doesn't have buyers, definitely you may encounter some challenges. Or if your product that you are selling is cost, then since the system is being deregularized, the marketers will take an advantage of going outside and buy a cheaper one.
Right, which is the point we've been making here.
No, what I mean, if your product is cost, listen to me.
Yes, but what are the factors that lead to...
Every marketer is looking for money.
Yes, but what are the factors that lead to high costs of
Very good. The factor is from the manufacturers.
Right.
If maybe you have a refinery.
Right.
Let me talk in terms of refinery, because that is where I have an idea.
Yeah.
If you have a refinery in the country and you refine your product, you should make sure that your product is a little bit cheaper than anybody that is going to import.
Regardless of how this product is refined?
No, not regardless.
Okay.
Normally the product that we have been using, anybody that is using product for his filling station, it has to be satisfied.
Okay.
Let me
all right.
It has to be satisfied by the authority concerned.
Okay.
Because we have the authority.
Okay.
You cannot bring anything anyhow and start selling.
Okay. Let's come to Engineer Mansour Ahmed to help us
I
out
have
here.
worked in the refining industry for about 25 years.
Yes.
About 15 years in NMPC refineries, Kaduna, Port Harcourt, and National. And another 10 years in the Dangote refinery. Or in the Dangote group, so not the refinery in particular, because the refinery has only been operating now for just about a year. Now, again, we go to the issue of when you have an industry like the Dangote refinery, a large industry, very large, almost $20 billion worth of refinery. It needs three things. It needs, obviously, crude, sufficient crude to run on a continuum basis, on a regular basis, continuous supply of crude. Our understanding is that the NMPC is not able to supply the crude, the full requirement of the crude. So it means Dangote has to go out and buy some of the crude, perhaps a significant quantity of that crude. Secondly, it's a new refinery, so it needs time to build skill, capacity. We had to employ probably about 30,000 workers during the construction, and right now we probably have something in the region of 5,000 to 10,000 workers. And those people have to build the skill and the confidence. Obviously also, the ecosystem, the environment for refining has to be supportive of it. And to a large extent, when you have a refinery that's less than 1 year old, and it is now told it has to compete with the refinery in Russia that is maybe 100 years old, processing perhaps lower quality crude than, for instance, the Nigerian crude, because everybody knows the Nigerian crude is what they call
sweet crude.
Sweet crude,
low sulfur
crude. And you have a situation where Dangote the refinery is starting to produce its products, and suddenly you're told that you have to compete with the Russian crude, for instance, with the Russian product, which is all over. And this is a market that over the past 30 years at least has been allowed to capture the entire sub-Saharan African market. People have come and, captured significant swathes of the market. There are probably a few companies, I'm talking about the large suppliers, not the retailers, who have been supplying the whole of West Africa. And they have established a strategy whereby they can supply products either cheaper in terms of the cost, because as the professor mentioned, the situation in Russia is now that much of Russian products are being undersold, are being discounted, right? Because Europe, which is their main market, is not taking their products, right? Also, we know that Russian crude is much, much heavier than Nigerian crude. So the products, and for those who understand refining, the products of heavier crude tend to be, of course, of lower quality. For instance, the higher the sulfur content in the crude, the higher the sulfur content in the products, in the diesel, for instance. And clearly, what we started saying is that there is a need for government to recognize that this $20 billion refinery is no longer just the Dangote refinery. It's a Nigerian refinery. Indeed, to a large extent, it's an African refinery, because there is no other refinery of that size anywhere in Africa. And if indeed it is allowed to mature, it will supply at least the entire West African region. But that needs government support, that needs government policy, that needs regulators to recognize that we have to ensure that we give this baby, our baby, opportunity to learn, to grow.
All right.
And because if we do that, and it is able to catch up, to reach the level in terms of quality, in terms of productivity, in terms of skills, in terms of scale, to a level that it can compete with the Russian refiners, the American refiners, and the European refiners. If we allow it to do that, and it should not take too long, maybe we're talking about 2-3 years, then we can open up and allow any product to come, because then it can compete with that product. Right. But until government provides that support, that protection, the chances are that these other products that are coming in will actually swamp. For instance, we have known situations where people will import the cheaper Russian refinery, go to some place near our country, Lome or something, and buy even the Nigerian, the Dangote crude, and then mix it and bring the price down, the cost down, so that they can then come and compete on cost basis. So there are issues that really we need to take ourselves, above the level of the individual situation, to see the broader picture, to see the interests of Nigeria as a whole, and to say we are going to support this refinery to grow to a point where it will then satisfy our housing. Not only that, Cyril, growth. This country will not stay at 220 million forever. In fact, the projection is that by 2050 we are going to be about 400 million.
50 million.
We're going to need more refineries. And where will those refineries come from? From private investors. Because we know, for at least since 1989, government has not invested any money in the refining sector. I worked for that refining sector, and I know that we started investing in refineries since 1965, when we built the first Dangote refinery. Sorry, the first Port Harcourt refinery. Since then, we added another one in Warri in 1978, another one in Kaduna in 1980, and a third one in Port Harcourt in 1989. And from 1989, no more refining capacity. On the contrary, actually, because of lack of protection, even of the government refineries, what happened? The refineries were allowed literally to collapse. And we now reverted to Alaji's field of import.
No.
Okay,
so
that one is not my.
I want to weigh in.
Well, at this point, we'll take a short break.
Importation is not my.
We'll take a short break here. When we return, of course, will be more on the issues at stake, and hopefully then we'll get to hear your views as well when the phone lines are open. So stay with us. We'll be back shortly.
The counsel of our fathers.
I will urge and advise our younger generation to use talent and brain to sort out problems, not arms.
Nigerian youths, let's build our nation.
My advice to these young people is please do not take us back to those harrowing days. You probably do not know what it is.
I believe we have fought one civil war too many in this country. So those who experience it will run away from it.
Nigerian youths, let's build our nation together.
NTA Tuesday Live, a network issue-oriented innovation talk show.
All right, thank you for staying with us, and we still have more on the issues at stake tonight. Let me just say here that in a short while, the phone lines will be open, and you can join in the conversation. And we always tell you that if you're calling in and your call gets through, turn down the volume of your TV set to avoid the hurlback or the echo, and we want you to just go straight to the point and not worry too much about greetings. just a simple hello. We'll start off with a number of reports which we still have here. We have coming up right now another report from Umar here.
To promote federal government's three policy goals of stable prices, full employment, and economic growth, Abia State government said the state is determined to ensure a healthy economy by providing infrastructure that will drive the agenda.
Since he came in, he centered mostly on trying to improve the ease of doing business, because everything about business transaction is centered on an improved and a good or a conducive business environment. Because when you provide a conducive business environment, you see businesses thriving naturally.
Also, the state government or the federal government have to create other good opportunities by making sure that there are facilities for production, making sure that there are no undue obstacles placed along the line of production.
In collaboration with government, identifying the areas that government should bring in some help. I mean, like right now, an average business person in Nigeria cannot meet up with the cost of diesel or fuel. It is very expensive, and the government power is not regular. And so by the time you buy diesel or fuel to run your company, you realize you hardly have enough to sustain the investment. I think government has to think fast in that area.
The recently inaugurated power plant in Aba is one out of many projects designed to promote genuine business ventures, market Aba-made products, as well as attract prospective investors, such that there is now an ongoing construction of indigenous vehicle assembly plant in Obuako in Okwa West Council of the state, which will create employment opportunities when completed.
So what we do as a government, we promote their businesses. We try even as far as going far to getting contracts or markets for them.
Rehabilitation of deplorable roads and ongoing fixing of other social amenities in the city of Aba and its environs have started yielding positive results. 300 youth of Abia State have recently concluded their modern agricultural program in Nasarawa State as part of government efforts in harnessing potentials of unskilled citizenry. In Umuahia, Delight in Jinkunye.
All right, next report comes from Kaduna.
Are the backbone of the economy, as they provide 4 out of the 5 jobs in the private sector and contribute more than half of the value added created by businesses in the country. It has provided an attractive investment destination backed by a robust economic fundamentals for businesses to thrive, as the country remains a hub of successful global brands. A visit to some of the surviving industries in Kaduna metropolis reveals how they are operating skeletal services due to unpalatable situation for them to operate.
We will, if we can get more support, we can do better.
Talking about energy cost alone, manufacturers have a lot to complain about. Other things to be considered, your packaging. If you package in a good bag, the cost of procuring, one of the bags is all-time high.
The federal and state government's investment potential to put the economy on the right trajectory has attracted key players in the recovery process, and particularly empowering and protecting local industries for sustainable national development.
From the federal government also, we are getting support like Textile Intervention Fund. Through Textile Intervention Fund, we got the loan to purchase the machinery. We modernized our plant, and we got the loan through BOI. CBN has dispersed the loan. and with their support, we maintained our productivity and quality of our products.
If local manufacturers are not supported, if we don't promote indigenous manufacturers and local content, we'll end up paving the way for foreigners to take over, and that will cost us a lot. We'll have to downsize, the economy will feel the pain, people will lose their jobs. So if government is to come in, it's to come in many ways. First of all, in the fertilizer industry, we are battling with the issue of adulteration.
Stakeholders say sustaining businesses in Kaduna requires a strong financial stability due to lack of electricity, high cost of raw materials, diesel, among others. In Kaduna, I am Muhammad Murajingi.
And now let's go over to Port Harcourt for this next report.
There is this belief, okay, is it not produced here? It is because they have that alternative of having the foreign product. And because of our mindset as especially Nigerians, we believe that anything that is coming from abroad is better than what we have here.
The story of Sonny Anibode, a craftsman in the business of cane weaving, is an example of the challenges that confronts an average Nigerian artisan as they struggle to stay afloat in business, occasioned by high demands of imported goods. The importance of manufacturing has always been recognized because of its economic stabilization, capacity to stimulate favorable trade balance, job and wealth creation potential. Experts say Nigeria's local industry is lacking in profiting from the global markets as numerous challenges, especially limited export opportunities, hinder prospects.
In as much as the federal government is saying that they want to support non-oil export, the state government should key into that. Our national plan should make sure that from the local government, federal government, and to the state governments, each local government in Nigeria has something that we are known for.
If the local industries have been taken care of, the supervisors are up and doing, I believe that the lack of jobs in the country will reduce, because it will give people an opportunity to earn a living.
It is not impossible for us to grow this economy. Government should work on provision of constant electricity and then look at the issue of double taxation. Industries should not be placed on certain level of taxation.
A very vibrant subsector of manufacturing is the micro, small, and medium enterprises. Economic and investment experts are advocating a more favorable physical environment and removal of barriers to the growth of the sector for an overall revamp of the local industry.
The challenge for the local industry is the imported goods meet international standards, they are durable, and that's because they're coming from a stable economy. The price fluctuations, the high duty tariffs and all that do not affect them back home. So our people find it easier to sell the imported goods than the local goods.
Our local producers should be encouraged. And one of the good ways to encourage them is to make the system work, infrastructure, electricity, good roads and whatever. Give them soft loans that will encourage local production too. So those things will help us.
The consensus is that encouraging the production and consumption of local products can usher the nation into the path of the much desired economic prosperity. In Port Harcourt, Chidiebere Onyia.
Well, again, let's get to listen to what the industrialist Alhaji Aliko Dangote had to say quite recently on some of these issues, which have been highlighted in the last three reports that we carried, and of course in the discussion that has been going on in the studio. Let's get to see this other part of it.
I commend and congratulate His Excellency, the Vice President, and the leadership of the Manufacturers Association of Nigeria for initiating this, and I hope it will be a continuing platform that will enable us to coherently and sustain efforts to drive the reindustrialization of our economy, which is necessary for us. Before I delve into my paper, let me start with some key messages. And please, I would like you to note. Import dependence is equivalent to importing poverty, exporting jobs. Anything that you import, you are importing poverty into your nation and you are exporting jobs out. No power, no growth, no prosperity. So unless you have a power, you will not have growth, you will not have prosperity. Similarly, no affordable financing, no growth, no prosperity. There is no industrialization without protection. So ignoring all these facts is what gives rise to insecurity, banditry, kidnapping, and abject poverty in the land. Now, let me dive into the details of my paper, which I would like to present. It is now an established fact that industrialization is an inescapable route to sustainable and inclusive economic growth and human development. I believe we all know the critical role of manufacturing plays in the modern economy, especially its impacts on other sectors through various linkages, which is job creation, economic diversification, FX generation, government revenues, technology transfer and adaptation, and innovation. Manufacturing remains a key driver in a nation's quest for economic development and self-sufficiency. It is easy to determine the level of economic development, growth, and well-being of a nation by observing its manufacturing sector. It is evident that the strength of a country's manufacturing sector determines its capacity to compete in global trade, which is about 70% in manufacturing goods, according to the available statistics. Countries that have industrialized and have a robust manufacturing sector and able to export manufactured goods are generally able to grow their economies through global trade.
All right. Already calls have been coming through to people who want to contribute to the discussion here in the studio. I'm not sure if we still have the first caller still online. Do we still have? Okay, fine. So at this point, let's go over to Hector Igbike-Owubo once again in Houston.
Cyril, what exactly do you want me to address?
Right.
Because there's been several issues. So what do you want me to talk about?
Yes, we just before we took a break, we were on the subject matter of why goods that are manufactured locally cost a lot more than some that have been imported, and why people would go for them. The twin issue of the taste of the citizens for foreign-made goods, and of course why locally produced goods are oftentimes more expensive than the ones that are brought in, because it's quite possible that those who are bringing in these goods or dumping these goods in the country have some support of their government, and they are much larger, have been in business for much longer, and the newer industries here are unable to compete on the same level.
Well, I think discussants have roundly addressed the causative factors. Clearly, the lack of clarity regarding government policy and implementation, the issue of cost of energy, all of these are factors at play. If you have a government that does not protect its local industries, this is what you get. There has to be a concerted effort to protect local manufacturing. And when that doesn't happen, you have dumping of goods. And naturally, when goods are dumped, you have a situation where the citizenry will settle for what is cheaper and what, in their own opinion, has better quality, as it were. But let me clarify what I said earlier. I didn't just speak to the lack of energy policy. I said there is a lack of an energy security strategy. Energy security strategy. It is not enough to have the PIA. The Petroleum Industry Act, yes, speaks to bringing together all the loose laws around petroleum mining, production, community issues, and stuff like that. But we have a situation today where the energy industry has become like shifting sands. If you look at the IOCs have evolved. The IOCs, now I'm talking about international oil companies, they've all evolved. From Mobil to Total to ENI to Chevron to Shell. They are all integrated energy companies. They're all doing renewable energy. It is shocking that as we speak, the NNPC does not have a renewable energy division. So if the NNPC is not, as it were, making progress in that direction, you begin to wonder where that leaves the rest of Nigeria. There has to be an effort to move with the times and not be caught napping. So until we have a coherent energy security strategy, we can't make progress. All the countries across the globe, whether you call it newly industrialized, they all have a coherent energy security strategy. If you don't have a coherent energy security strategy, you'll continue to go round and round in circles. Nothing will get done. We will not industrialize anytime soon. And the last 12 to 14 years, the only progress of note Nigeria has made is with regard to Nigerian content. The setting up of the Nigerian Content Development Monitoring Board. That was a lovely policy, it still is, and appreciable progress has been made in that regard. Now, I overheard Alhaji Shetima talking about the NNPC trying, rolling out gas stations and stuff like that. But you see, until we begin to see impacts, we can't speak to the NNPC trying. Until we begin to hold people accountable, we will not make progress also. Last year, before the close of the year, we were told the Port Harcourt refinery will be up and running. A lot of noise was made around that talking head, that government had invested billions of dollars. And if I recall correctly, in the last 10 years, the federal government through the NNPC had spent over $12 billion. I need for that to sink in. $12 billion on turnaround maintenance of the refineries. Today, as we speak, nobody is being held accountable. How can we make progress when nobody is held to account? These are critical success factors. If there's no accountability, we will continue down this road. Another case in point to note, you cannot, for the life of me, have 445,000 barrels set aside for domestic refining. And you have a Dangote refinery, and we're talking about building up capacity. If you have 445,000 barrels of crude oil allotted to the NNPC for domestic refining, why are we still talking about petroleum products imports? What does the NNPC do with 445,000 barrels? Why doesn't the NNPC have an enduring arrangement with the Dangote refinery? They have 20% equity in that refinery. So why aren't they refining that much over there? What happens to the 445,000 barrels they get every day? The NNPC is the sole owner of the MPDC. The MPDC does a minimum of 150, 200,000 barrels of crude every other day. Now, we all know that the NNP, the refinery, if you refine your crude, you can get 6,000 byproducts, 6,000 from a barrel of crude. You get 6,000 byproducts. So it goes to reason that Nigeria stands to make more money refining crude oil rather than selling it as crude to would-be buyers. So why aren't we refining? Why haven't this country seized the opportunity presented by the Dangote refinery? So I think we have more questions than answers.
All right. Okay, thank you. We'll return to you in just a moment, but you've also raised a number of issues which the gentleman here in the studio here would like to comment on, not the least the question about whether the NNPCL is investing in renewable.
No, I think the issue there is whether NNPC has a renewable energy department. And of course the answer is yes, it does have a renewable energy department. Now, I first of all want to agree with Hector that we do not have a coherent and consistent energy policy on the whole. But we do have, in fact, I was listening to a lecture by Professor Abubakar Sambo, who was the DG of the Energy Commission of Nigeria for some years, and who was the Vice Chancellor of, I think, Tafawa Balewa University. And he actually laid out the energy strategy, the energy security strategy. And he identified all the various energy sources that Nigeria has, and that really is surprising because obviously, apart from oil and gas, we have abundant sunshine, so we can do solar, we have biomass, we have hydro energy in many, many locations, and we have even the wind energy in some locations. I think Katsina has recently established a 10 megawatt, is it 10 megawatt wind, what do you call it, wind turbine. The problem, and I agree with Hector on this, is that these various strategies are not coordinated and coherent and are not properly implemented. So that obviously is a question we have always raised in Nigeria, the problem of implementation of even the policies that are in place. Now, the other issue that was raised, I think, by Hector has to do with this issue of cost of energy. The problem is that because of inadequacy of the basic public sector power supply, manufacturing in Nigeria costs at least 40% higher, for the same level of activity than manufacturing, say, in places like India or South Korea, not to talk about America and Europe. Because two things. One, the energy you get from the grid, which is high anyway, is still about 30% cheaper than if you produce the energy yourself from generators. Because when you produce on a mass scale, which is what the grid does, you obviously gain in what they call scale economies, right? So not only that, you don't have enough, but also what you get is not consistent. It's fluctuating. I think we had in the last 1 month, there has been at least three national collapse shutdowns of the national grid. Now, what that does to the cost of operation, what that does to the cost of production is unbelievable. Because there are some industries, if you shut it down because of power, the entire products within the system will have to be condemned.
Okay. Let me just ask us to take a moment here and get to the phones. We have a caller, Umar Anache, who's been on the line for quite some time now from Birnin Kabi. Hello, Umar, if you're there, go ahead. Hello? All right. It would seem that he's not there anymore, and yes.
I wanted to bring to your attention the operations of the political economy on all of this. So even where we have conscious policy, I work with Energy Commission of Nigeria, and they have very broad energy security policy. But if you look at the oil and gas we have been talking about, Nigerian government has tried to get the oil majors to invest in refining in the country. They haven't got there. They've even offered them co-location. Can you come and co-locate with the existing refinery? They didn't go there. Dangote offered and actually paid $600 million for 2 of the refineries. Yaradua came and returned his money. And it was a strategic error, because if that was allowed, he wouldn't even have needed to put more than $2 billion to have us cruising at a different altitude. And we would never have had to come to a point where we are borrowing 500 billion every month as subsidy for pay. We would never have come to all these shenanigans if we had had that. And it would have doubled the investment in size with over 4 or 5 billion. All these things would have been history. But we did that. It was political economy, the way it operated. Now, you now have a case now. And I can't even understand why we are talking about 5,000 barrels a day with NMP. Doing what with NMPs? The fact of the matter is that this investment in a modular refinery and in Dangote refinery are national assets and should be treated as strategic investment and should have a first charge, irrevocable first charge on that 5,000 barrels. It's not even negotiable. A French government can have a first charge on all the Francophone countries' contract, private government contracts, let alone our own quest to use our own resources to add value to them, create jobs in this country, and keep it. It's all unspeakable that you should be even talking about that.
Okay.
Then, of course, you now move forward to say, I mean, I remember on the occasion in the retreat of our Ministry of Finance Incorporated, where I had to argue certain things. I said, I want the oil marketers to be part of the solution rather than to be part of the problem. If you want to do backward integration, say to them, I mean, these 5 oil majors, say to them, look, if you want to continue to lift crude or lift PMS, come and show me your modular refinery. Within 6 months, they will all have 5 modular refineries working. But the fact of the matter is this, they will now use their assets, their tank farms, to store their finished products. They can export them or they can enter into the national distribution network. But you can't they feel that they are not going to be part of the equation. They understand? But if it has to do quality, there are issues about quality. We remember when we had to shut down petrol stations because we had too much ethanol in the thing. And then if you are not using, I'm not going to accuse them directly, but if you are not using the condensate field products made by the people in the creeks, if there's no market for them, they would not be doing it. Because people buy them and then mix them with products, and we get polluted products.
Okay, let's try and get on the phones for now. I will return to this, and we have Henry calling in from Port Harcourt. Hello. Hello.
Yeah, hello, good evening.
Yes, good evening. Go right ahead.
Hello, good evening.
Yes, go ahead. If this is Henry, go ahead.
Thank you for such a program. It's quite expository. Yes, it's quite expository and quite enlightening. I want to talk specifically on textile industries in Nigeria.
Yes, please, Henry, can you just go on?
Initially, at our tender age, say 1985 and thereabouts. Then, after secondary school, our uncles were employed in textile mills, maybe in Asaba, and they start working after secondary school. But coming to, say, 1990s, 1992, 1993, those textile mills started closing up. And people started losing their jobs after school. I don't really know what is happening. Why can't government put attention in reviving these textile industries so that some of these youth that are out of school can be employed? Why leaving the industry to die off? And secondly is that jobs are being exported outside this country to China. Okay. If this textile mills start working, a lot of these places will employ persons that will work, and this insecurity and hunger will drop, and our economy will be boosted also.
All right.
I think.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Henry. Right. Okay. Yes. Alhaji Shatima, let's hear you on this.
Okay. Definitely, Dangote has really tried for constructing, for investing, for making a heavy investment in the country. He tried for that, no doubt about it. And he needs government cooperation. But the issue we marketers were trying to emphasize, if a refinery is being constructed in the country, we're expecting to have a lower rate of the price so that any marketer will go outside and import. Because presently what is happening in a real sense, so marketers are importing diesel outside and they sell lower than what Dangote refinery is selling. So that is the reason why we say he has to check his market. Despite the fact that even because I know the government is giving him assistance right from the construction of the refinery up to the present date, he has been getting that assistance because there is no way you can make a very heavy investment without influence of the government. Because even we who are constructing minor filling stations, we get an enabling environment by the government to construct. Talk less of somebody who invested heavily. So our just advice, let them review their price. Because by the time when they review the price, they compete with outside refineries. definitely I know he will get more market. Whether government give him a crude oil, just like what they have stated now, there is over 6,000 items that when you refine, you can get it through the crude oil. So for the issue now, we come and start discussing. Some marketers are selling fake product or adulterated. Actually, if there is any adulteration, we independent petroleum marketers, we can be able to detect. And I know it makes it very difficult for anybody to import a higher sulfur content from the country. Because if the content is not good by now, you will hear a lot of noise. But presently, we doesn't have any issue of bad fuel. But the only thing they should review their rate. So that Nigerian masses, because our thinking, immediately when we get this refinery, we are thinking that to get something lower rate than what people has been importing. Just like what I have said, the challenge is here. Since this refinery was being, when he started producing, we bring our offer, we independent petroleum marketers, because most of the products they imported in the country, we consume almost 85% of that product. But by the time when his product, he is giving it to the other heavy marketers or other multinational companies. You know, by the time when we go there to buy through them, they will add more margin, whereby it will drive us from buying the product through him. So I think the best solution, let him check the price.
Okay. All right, we have just a few more minutes to go on this program tonight. So at this point in time, we'll begin to wind down and take the closing comments of our guests. And sorry? Yes, and let me start off by going back to Houston. And I would like you to speak to the matter of energy, which has been mentioned over and over again, and which you have yourself spoken about the absence of an energy security strategy. In all of this, manufacturing is affected by high energy costs. And that has been said by many, many, many manufacturers. Beyond them, even agencies that to a large extent provide social services. I've heard CMDs of hospitals complain about their energy costs being higher than their allocation. So I'd like you to speak to that as we talk about encouraging or providing the environment for manufacturing to thrive.
Thank you, Cyril. I'm going to still harp on an energy security strategy. An energy security strategy speaks to the whole gamut of energy security. It's not just one aspect. It's when we talk about energy security, we are talking about security of supplies. When we talk about energy security, we are talking about the mix itself. What are the applications? What is best suited for what part of the country? And how do we go about encouraging it? We're talking about from solar energy, that's all of the renewables, you know, whether it's CNG, whether it's LPG, whether it's LNG supplies, whether it's electricity, what kind of electricity supply is suited for what part of the country? What kind of vehicular traffic do we want to see in the next 5 years? What's the mix going to be? These issues have to be roundly addressed so that we do not have a Tinubu administration today coming up with its own idea of what constitutes energy security. Tomorrow we have a Cyril Stoba administration talking about its own idea of energy security. No, Nigeria needs a coherent and clearly spelled out energy security that can encourage manufacturing, that can guarantee healthcare services, that can guarantee transportation, vehicular traffic within the country. You have countries in Europe talking about phasing out what they call it, hydrocarbon fuel cars by 2035, 2034, 2050, stuff like that. What is Nigeria's own security, energy security going forward? Because energy security affects everything. So until we address Nigeria's energy security strategy, we will not make the kind of progress we want to see.
All right, so
that's my take.
At this point, we'd like to say thank you so very much, Hector Igbikio-Wubo, Editor-in-Chief, Sweet Crude Reports, who joined us from Houston via Zoom. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts with us. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
Right. Back here in the studio, Prof, as we round off.
Well, I think we have to show a lot more respect to our domestic investors who have staked everything that they have. Because the kind of investment in this refinery of $20 billion is more than our foreign direct investment over the last 5 to 10 years. And then why are we playing fiddles with this? You know, America's dream was realized by 6 men that built America. Vanderbilt, you know that. You have the Rockefeller Foundation, the Rockefeller, you have the JP Morgan. They brought steel, they have Carnegie. They brought steel, they built railway, they built finance, investment, and that's how they built America. And then we have our own that is fighting to protect our own economy, invest in our own economy, put everything that he has earned in life. And then we are arguing whether we should circumscribe national assets with access to national crude. We are arguing it when somebody has vested his life. Okay. And we have good examples where it has worked. We've seen what happened in cement. Why won't we do that same backward integration in modular refinery? Why don't we do it in others that have worked? We don't want to try what has worked. We're surrendering to a political economy that makes us a perpetual importer and an interdependent economy. That's not going to take us very far.
All right. Thank you so much, Prof. And Alhaji Abubakar Shatima, as we close your final
Well,
thoughts.
in fact, me, I will say let Nigerians accept with the Mr. President agenda on green energy, because the green energy at the end of the day will be a solution for bringing the price of PMS down drastically. So let us give a support on the green energy. When I say green energy, I'm referring to LPG, LNG, electric energy, and even solar energy.
Okay. Yes, and maybe just one quick one. How far has IPMAN, you and your members, gone in keying into this policy?
Yes, we are working day and night, and we are securing the land, and we started engaging our foreign investors that we are going to construct a Moza stations, because it is true when we get the Moza station that we can be able to carry our product to our daughter filling station. And we are still in talk with government in terms of conversion.
All right.
So very soon, if Mr. President accepted with our request, definitely in terms of conversion, we are going to use all our filling stations to have a conversion center so that we can be able to start converting vehicles, different types of vehicles. So we are on the program and we have been following. We are in talk with the Minister of Gas. Okay. Always we have been contacting him and seeking some advices. and advise. He give us advice. We advise him.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. Thank you so much. And well, Engineer Mansour Ahmed, as we round off.
Thank you very much. Yes. Well, first of all, I think if we add up all the discussions, it is clear that Nigeria must develop a clear, consistent, purposeful industrial policy, which ensures that industries, people who invest in industries are supported and protected and encouraged to grow. Because without growth, as Dangote said, there will be no prosperity. And secondly, in this policy, we must encourage the domestication of what we consume. Because at the end of the day, if we do not produce what we consume, we are going to have to import all of it. And as Dangote said, the more you import, what you import, you are actually importing poverty. What you whereas you are exporting, jobs. So if we want, and we have millions and millions of young people on the street today without jobs. So we must create more industries, whether they are small and medium scale or they are large scale, because that is what improves employment. Thirdly, we must look at how we finance our industries, particularly small scale. There is no way you can run a small scale industry successfully if you have to pay 30% interest rate or more. And I know that many countries are able to provide what they call single digit interest rate for their industries. What we do here is to sort of tell the banks that government will provide palliative if you reduce it. They don't reduce it. We must create an environment, a financial structure, which enables us to go to the bank and borrow at single interest rate. Many countries, at one point, in fact, in the US and so on, you could actually get less than 1% interest to run your business. Fourthly, apart from financing, I think the other issue is clearly taxation. Nigeria is the only country where a manufacturer of a product may have to pay something like 60 to 200 different taxes, particularly depending on how you market. Every time you cross a local government, border, you pay tax. Every time you cross a local government border, you pay tax. If you go and put your name on your house, you pay tax. If you produce this, you will pay tax on this, you will pay tax on the water, you will pay tax on the bottle, on the top separately. Too many taxes. About 200 different taxes have been found in some respect. I believe government is aware of all of these things. And I understand that the committee that President Tinubu has set up, the Finance and Taxation Committee or something, is working to reduce the taxation, at least to not more than 10 different taxes. Right. And I believe that also it is looking at how the banking sector can be encouraged and supported to provide low interest fund for people who want to invest. But whatever happens, the final word I want to take is that if we don't strongly support our local industries, if we don't protect them as they grow to become competitive, first of all, they will not grow, they will not become competitive, and will forever depend on importation.
Right.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Engineer Mansour Ahmed. Well, this conversation is by no means over. A second part of it is coming up shortly in the editions ahead. So stay with us on NTA. We'll bring you a second part of this conversation soon enough. And on that note, I'd like to thank you all for staying up with us till this point, especially for the one or two calls I think we were able to squeeze in today. Not to worry, second part of this conversation is coming up. But for now, I would like to thank you all and say next week we'll be back with NTA Tuesday Live. I'm Cyril Stover. Bye for now.